In today's video, I wanted to show you how to prune these limelight hydrangeas or any Panicle hydrangea or Hydrangea arborescens, which is like the Annabelle style hydrangea. It's pretty easy. These bloom on new wood, so we do prune these in the spring. The other hydrangeas which bloom on old wood, like your mountain hydrangeas, those get pruned in the fall, because if you prune those in the spring, you're going to lose your blooms for the whole season. These, like I mentioned, bloom on new wood, so we can go ahead and start pruning these up. Right now it is end of March in Fountain Inn, South Carolina, and these are starting to bud up. They're actually more than budding up. They're starting to leaf out, but we still have plenty of time to be able to do it. So let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit. And if you hear my dog freaking out, he wants our attention, but let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit and I can show you what I like to prune, what I don't like to prune, and so on. First thing that I like to look for are branches that are crisscrossing. So if we follow this large branch all the way up, you see how it's crisscrossing with this branch coming out. Any obvious branches like this that are just going straight up, straight sideways, just awkward, I just will take those off completely. So let's go ahead and prune that. You can use handheld pruners. I honestly could not find mine, so I'm using these large lobbers, but anything will work. So that's all you need to do. I just cut that one flush right here with this branch, and now we're going to go ahead and remove this whole branch. The next branch I'm going to prune, if you can see this branch right here, it's just genuinely shooting out sideways. It's not going out evenly, it's going inward. So this entire branch is going to put too much weight on here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this one right here. You can keep these for decoration if you want. These blooms are huge. So first I like to look at those sideways or awkward branches. There's still a few here that I see that I'm going to trim off, but I just want to give you the general idea of what I'm looking at when I'm pruning this. Notice here too, this is a hydrangea on standard, which essentially means it's a hydrangea on a stick, or like a lollipop style hydrangea. I do need to move this over. For some reason it's leaning. We'll get that fixed and we'll pull it at some point. But essentially for any hydrangea like this, whether it's on standard or on the ground, you'll prune it the same way because it's on new wood that it's blooming. You do want to take no more than a third. These honestly you can prune pretty heavily. I might take it down a little more than a third. When I'm saying a third, essentially from the top here, I'm going to prune it all the way down to a third. Last year, I did a little less than a third and I went a little conservative. And now this hydrangea, honestly, if you can see, the blooms got a little too tall for me. It didn't quite grow in the shape that I wanted to. So now I'm just going to bring it down some, and then I'm going to try to shape it in terms of bringing it down to a third. So again, I couldn't find my larger handheld pruners, and sometimes you just got to do the job. So I'm going to use these tiny little pruning shears. Between this and the loppers that I have, we'll get the job done. But what I'm looking at is, again, I'm bringing this down to a third. So if you want to zoom in here, we can just look, where am I pruning? Anytime I make a cut, I'm going to make a cut above a leaf node or a bud, so that this then can stick out that way. You can see where it's growing. But again, I'm just going to bring this down to a third. So you can see this branch right here is growing out of nowhere. So I'm going to cut this guy back. Right there. I want outward facing branches. I don't want inward facing branches into the center, or branches that are crossing, or branches that are going to go straight up like this branch right here that we see. So I'm going to go ahead and give her a cut. You see right here, it's getting kind of cluttered and all these are kind of growing in together. So I'm just going to figure out who is getting in the way and just kind of make decisions as to what I'm going to prune here. So I can tell this branch right here was growing downward and getting in the way of all these other branches. I can even fine prune these tiny little branches right here. And then I kind of open this up for all these branches here to kind of have a little room to breathe and leaf out. I'm going to go ahead and go to town, start chopping this up a third, and I'll show you at the end what it looks like a little more. But again, branches that are crossing, just find, either cut it back to here, like that. This branch is cutting, you can cut it back to here, or you can cut that entire branch. And then whenever I'm making a cut to cut it back to a third, I'm going to cut above a leaf node, like that, so that you can see. I'm not going to leave it halfway because I don't want twigs sticking out and then the leaves growing out that way. So let's get to pruning. So right now I'm just taking a step back, just like an artist when you're painting. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to see, did I take off enough on one side? Is it lopsided a little bit? I did take off about a third-ish. Obviously, I'm taking into account that it's crooked. I need to get it straightened up. But I do notice right here, the way it's growing, I don't know if you guys can see this hydrangea in particular, this branch, it needs some growth down here, right? So I'm going to try to leave branches that are going to encourage growth down here. So I'll leave this branch. This branch is crossing here technically, but if I were to take it out, I'm not going to have much growth here. So for the shape of the plant, I'm going to leave this here for now until I can eventually prune it so that I can encourage more branches on this side. But I took down about a third. And now what I'm going to do is do that fine pruning, tuning, if you will, of these just little dead branches right here in between, little twigs, things that aren't really serving the plant right now. They're just kind of dead. I can even break them off with my fingers because they're dead. And again, if you feel intimidated by this or you feel like you might screw it up, even if you just shaped it and you didn't think about anything else, you really can't mess this up because these plants are pretty bulletproof and they bloom on new wood. So this year's growth, you'll still get blooms. There's not a ton of risk involved here. To me, in my eye, I just need to take off a little bit of bulk on this side just so it matches the other side. So I'm going to take off I'm going to come back a little bit more and bring the plant in just a little bit. All right, guys, so imagine this straightened up, and then imagine it just leafed out fully, and then with a lot of blooms. I took off about a third, like I mentioned, of the entire canopy, and then I went in and I just kind of discerned what was crossing, and then I took out all the dead stuff. Honestly, that's all there's to it. Don't overthink it too much. Like I mentioned earlier, you can cut below the leaf nodes. Even if you don't do that, even if you leave it, by the time these leaves out, you're going to have so many leaves covering the structure, you're not even going to see it. And at that time, when it does leaf out, you still can honestly even prune further. So if you want to be a little more conservative because you're scared to prune it, then later on when it leaves out, you see the shape and you don't quite like it, you can always fine tune it later because it's still not blooming yet and it'll produce blooms later. You may delay your bloom time just a little bit on those specific branches that you cut the leaves on, but still, you're going to get blooms no matter what. And it's pretty simple, pretty easy. You can't really mess it up. So if you're scared to do it, I'm going to encourage you today, get out there and just chop these off. Even if you do it halfway down and you feel like you killed the plant, you're not going to. They're tough. They'll make it. They'll be fine. Now this has a nice round globe shape, so it'll look like a lollipop or hydrangeas on a stick, like I said. We love this shape. Eventually we'll plant some annuals below here just to make this shine. I need to prune these boxwoods a little bit more. These are sprinter boxwoods, but we'll get to that in another video. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that was helpful and hopefully it felt simple to you and doable to you that you could do it at home. We'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.